everybody, to another episode of the Future of BizTech. I am your host, JC Granger, and I have with me Katherine Lehman, who is the CMO of ReturnBear. Katherine, thank you so much for being on the show. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what does ReturnBear do?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I am a marketing executive that has been specializing in logistics and supply chain for about the last handful of years. And I'm currently working with ReturnBear as their CMO because ReturnBear is doing something very interesting in the e-commerce and logistics space, specifically the reverse logistics space, where we are handling everything from the RMA side on the software side all the way through the reverse logistics all the way to actually getting forward fulfillment done for our customers, which if you're watching the news right now is very important, especially in the international space, which is where we shine.
What does RMA stand for, just for anyone who isn't aware?
Return management. Um, well, it's the return management portal, right? When you think about it, you're thinking about the return portal where you would go to return something.
So you basically handle when I impulsively send back half of my Amazon packages. Like, is that what we're talking about, kind of thing?
Yes. So we're for everybody that's not Amazon. We work a lot with Shopify merchants, things like that. But yeah, basically, if you're not Amazon and you need to handle international returns, we're the ones you come to.
Really? So how is, by the way, right now as of this recording, there's a lot of new tariffs that have hit. It's affected supply chains. I'm curious, like everyone's talking about how it's affected things getting to them. I'm curious, how is the current state of things affecting things getting returned? Does it like how does it go both ways? Like how does that work?
Uh, the short answer is that's a hot mess on the return side. Because when you send something from, we'll say China or the UK or whatever to the United States, for example, when it comes in, it hits all those duties, taxes, and tariffs. You got to pay all of that. So if you're going to send it back, you got to think about trying to get all that stuff back. It's called duty drawbacks, right? You're going to send it all the way back to its home country and you're going to try to get all that money back. It's a long process, a lot of paperwork, a lot of money. And then you're going to try to sell it again. And so then it's going to come back again. It's just
Yeah.
kind of a pain in the butt process for both the customer and for the merchant to try to go through all of that.
Does a software, does your company help with that, or is that something that has to be done separately because of the laws and regulations when it comes to peeling back and getting back your tariff money or whatever, or the taxes, whatnot?
So that's actually the unique part about ReturnBear. That is the one place where we are different from every other return platform and portal out there, is that we do what's called forward fulfillment. So because we're logistics, not just the software, we have our own warehouses. So say you bought a t-shirt from London for St. Patrick's Day, right? You look like you celebrate St. Patrick's Day.
I totally do. I live in Denver. We actually have the second largest St. Patrick's Day parade, besides Boston.
Okay.
It's a
So
big deal here for some reason. I don't know.
I know it's a big deal in a lot of places, but okay. So say you're in the United States, you're buying a t-shirt from this really cool place in Ireland for St. Patrick's Day. They ship it over to you. You try it on. You're like, damn, my biceps are too big. I need to send this back, right?
I hate that every time. Oh my God.
So you go to send it back, and right, you fill out your return portal, and you take it to a return bear drop point or whatever. Or you send it mail in, whatever. The company doesn't want it back all the way over there because St. Patrick's Day, you bought this shirt on March 1st and St. Patrick's Day is the 17th. It's going to take forever to get back over there, right? And the duties and taxes and tariffs and blah, blah, blah in between. So instead, Return Bear takes that return, we validate it, we make sure that it is a shirt, that it's in resellable condition, and we immediately put it back in your inventory so that they can now resell it to anybody in the United States. And it's only going to be, a minimal shipping cost versus the back and forth, back and forth. And you don't have to go through the duty taxes and tariffs drawbacks and all of that pain in the butt stuff in between, right? So not only do you get the sale faster, but you also get that inventory turned over quicker and you save a ton of money on shipping costs. Plus, it saves the planet. You're not sending stuff around the world 8 million times. So that is really unique that we can do that because of the systems that we put in place.
Well, let me ask you a question, and this kind of just popped in my head. Let's say, so right now they have, as of the recording of this, it's like 145% tariff on China goods.
Mhm.
Okay. In the scenario, because see, you said you get a refund on your tariff if it gets returned, right? You have to go through a process, but your software handles that, right? But generally, I would get my money back as a business if I had to return it from the tariff standpoint, correct?
Yes, you have to go through the
Okay.
process. It's called duty drawbacks. So
Yeah.
we don't do that as part of our platform, just to be clear, because we keep it in and we keep it in country. Once it gets to the
Sure.
country, we keep it there and then we
Uh,
just wait for it to be resold and then we ship it forward. We
well,
forward.
here's
Yeah.
my question then, right?
Okay.
So you do keep it here, but let's say I'm a small business and I had to pay all these tariffs for it coming in.
Mhm.
Then the tariffs drop. Let's say they get a deal
Mhm.
together.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be in my best interest to actually send it all the way back so that I can get it back without having to like to take the return? Like in that case, do you think there's gonna be this small period of window of time where you might get requests from clients to say, no, 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 send it back so I can get that money back, and then I'll bring it back again, and now I can actually make my margin? Because I just feel like there's gonna be this like window of time where after the tariffs go, I'm sure at some point they'll get a deal, but then it's like, well, wait a minute, if I actually let it go all the way back and then come back here, or have you thought about that? Like, do you think that's gonna happen?
So no, and the answer is because you're ignoring the other part of the equation, which is the actual shipping of the item, right?
Uh-huh.
Have you ever bought anything from the other half of the world?
Yeah, it takes forever, right?
Well,
Like,
it takes forever, but it's also super expensive to ship it, right?
yeah.
Because you have to send it ocean freight or air freight or whatever it is. Air is faster, so if speed is on your side, you're going to pay a lot of money to ship that across. When you return something, we've conditioned consumers to have free returns, right? So even if you're paying $10 to ship that back, it's not costing the company $10. It's probably costing them 20, 30, 40, 50. The amount of money that you would make back from sending it back and trying to do the duty drawbacks, not to mention the time cost, right? So you have to pay somebody to go through all of that paperwork if you're not using a service. You have to do the operational costs, you have to do all of those things in between. All of that adds up more than probably the cost of the tariff that brought it in there. You're still going to
So
lose.
it is better just to keep it here and then just try
It's
to,
way
yeah.
better. Yeah. Plus,
Well,
you're losing the time of it transitioning all the way back over there before you can verify it, give the customer their money back, because the customer is part of this too. If you're waiting for that shipment to go all the way back over there and then you're issuing a refund, they're pissed by that. They're not shipping with you again, and they're not going to buy anything. You lost that customer because it took 20 days to get a refund while it
you,
went
there
across.
was something interesting that started happening in the last year that I noticed when I would try to return certain things via Amazon, for example. And I would go and say, hey, like this thing was, because it was either too small or just it didn't work. It wasn't a good fit. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna send it back. And then I would get this notice basically saying, it's fine, just keep it.
Yes.
And I thought about that. I was like, wait, what? And then it kind of dawned on me that the math must be better for them to let me keep it than it is for them to deal with everything else and returning it. And I imagine that it's probably softwares like yours that enable people. I mean, Amazon has their own stuff, right? But
Yeah.
just that technology in general, it sounds like it's helped businesses understand and dial down to the exact costs of the return process to where an algorithm can say it's literally not even worth taking back. It'll cost us less money to give them their money back and not even get the item back. What do you say to that? Do you see that happening a lot? Is that a matter of the technology getting better and more fine-tuned so it's actually spitting out this like thumbs up, thumbs down thing for business owners?
I don't think it's as advanced as that. I think it has to do with the cost, right? People think, and a lot of businesses think that returns are costs only. We turn the cost back into profit because we give you the ability to resell it. But people still think of it as a cost. And if the cost is going to be more to get that item back, to have to spend the time to refurbish it or repackage it or do all that stuff with it, they're just going to assume that that's a lost cost anyway, and they're just going to write it off. So they'd rather you just keep the item and them not have to go through the time and energy and effort to repurpose that.
Mhm.
But an interesting part that you kind of mentioned there is you're getting a notification when you return it to just keep it. There's also a lot of problem right now with return fraud. I thought you were going to say you got a notice that said, hey, you've returned too many packages. You're
No, I actually think that I must be really good on their books because I'm clearly not getting I'm so good in their algorithm that like they can tell I'm not doing fraud that they're literally like it's fine, keep it, right? I imagine if I was returning things all the time, they wouldn't even just they probably just wouldn't let me buy anything anymore, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it also has to do with the customer experience, right? Because if they
Yeah.
tell you to just keep it, that's a great experience for you. You're like, great, I don't have to do anything. I get
Yeah.
my money back, and I'm more likely to buy something else. I used to shop with a retailer that would have a just keep it policy where they would let you keep the item and they would actually incentivize you to do that. So not only are we going to give you back your money, we're going to give you 10% more if you just keep it because we
As
really.
long as there's not abuse, because they'd be able to track individuals, right?
Yeah.
Like if someone was doing it a lot, you know.
Yes, yeah. And a lot of fraud happens on returns. One of the things our platform does really well is we reduce fraud by 100% and we back it up with a risk-free policy. So if we screw it up and we take back something that we shouldn't have, we cover the cost. You don't have to cover the cost.
Wow. Okay.
But a lot of times you'll get people that send back, I bought a pair of Nikes and I'm sending back a pair of Adidas that are old and worn. And
Okay.
again, if you're shipping it all the way back to, China or the UK, you're not going to know it until it arrives. You might have already preemptively issued that refund and that money is gone. That value is gone, that margin is gone, and now you're stuck with an item that's basically junk, right? So that happens a lot. There's a lot of.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think about that. I mean, because I don't do it. So, but I guess yeah, I can see how that would be a common thing. Someone buys a new pair and then sends back their old pair or something like that, right? Like somebody's figured out the holes in the system in every system, right? So they'll abuse it. But
And there's
um,
so many retailers out there, right? So you're talking a lot about Amazon. Amazon's one retailer, and yeah, they aggregate all their data and they have it and they share it. But if you're a serial return abuser, you can go to a different website every single day and make a purchase and just continue along that way. And the next thing you know, you have all of this. So those merchants that don't have their return process locked down with a company like ReturnBear, they're putting themselves at risk for a lot of return fraud.
so how big are you guys in the market? I mean, do you have a lot of other competitors, or did you guys kind of stumble into this, or purposely, I should say? You said 2019, I believe, earlier in the pre-show when we were talking. Yeah, 21. I'm sorry, 2021.
Yeah.
Was this not a thing? I mean, because you're helping all these small business owners and online shops right now, which is great because of course everyone can't be Amazon, right? They got to have this technology and these things. So, I mean, are you guys kind of cornering the market a little bit, or what's going on?
There's a lot of returns players out there, but what makes us different is we are the software, but we're also the logistics arms. Most companies are one or the other. So you have a couple of 3PLs that do reverse logistics, arguably not well. And then you have a lot of RMA players out there like Loop and Happy and all that other stuff. Usually they pick one or the other. I haven't run across another company that does both, that has warehouses, that has logistics, and they have software. Plus, there's nobody really willing to back it up with the risk-free return policy. And as far as I can tell, there's no one out there doing forward fulfillment the way that we do it. To be able to ingest those returns and give Shopify brands that Amazon like return experience.
Yeah.
In Canada, we have drop points we had them at Hudson Bay, we had them at Cadillac Fairview malls. So it's the same thing as like dropping off at Kohl's. Can replicate that for all of these merchants that we work with, and give them the same experience as Amazon. There's not really any other companies out there that are doing that. So there are a lot of players in the space, but for what we do and the value that we bring with the forward fulfillment and the fraud prevention, there's no one else doing that.
That's awesome. Well, so you're the CMO. So were you one of the original employees? Did you come in recently? Like what brought you to Return Bear originally?
I was brought in, so Return Bearer is unique in the way that three of the four C-suite are female, which in logistics is unheard of. I think
Yeah,
there's,
that's very rare. Yeah, that's a
yes,
very male dominated industry typically, right?
it is, yes. But our CEO is ex Shopify, and she's the one that identified the problem and built the company. I was brought in by the CRO who I'd worked with previously in a different logistics company because she knew my skill set and knew that this was a good match. So I've been working with them since around September and then full time since January. And really, what attracted me to it was how different the model is. And not just what we've already talked about, but the sustainability side of it. We're making goods go shorter distances, which is helping the sustainability angle. We cut emissions by 40% through what we do by not sending things around the world. So that part
Yeah,
was really huge for me. And it was a company I could really see myself being a part of and wanting to grow with. And I believe in the work that we're doing. Like we're doing something that's necessary.
yeah, I didn't really quite understand the climate impact of returns until I read some article about a few months ago, specifically about Amazon stuff and whatnot, and it kind of went down this rabbit hole essentially of like what people don't realize is that the the easy return policy is a good thing from a consumer standpoint. It does make things frictionless, but it also does it makes it so easy that it becomes frivolous, and then that it's like people don't realize what has to happen after that. But I think that's great that you guys stop it at the border essentially and say no, it's going to stay in here, and then we can process it and resell it again, so it's not going all the way back. Which also, I mean, listen, that helps the business itself, and and it helps the consumer because it would take less time for it to ship from that location than it would have from China, for example, right? So everybody kind of wins, and the planet wins. Like anytime we can get a triple win, I'm in, right? Like,
Yeah. That's actually our mission statement is we want to make returns better for the consumer, profitable for the merchants, and better for the planet. Like that's literally our mission statement. But curiously enough, have you seen the documentary? You said you went down the rabbit hole. Did you see the documentary Buy Now on Netflix?
no, I haven't, but that
Uh,
sounds really good. Now I might have to go look that up.
So it'll probably ruin your day, but it actually talks about the return problem and about how people return things and they just go to landfill. And that was part of why we started this company. There's a lot of consumer behavior right now, particularly from the Amazons of the world, called bracket buying. Have you heard this term before?
No.
So bracket buying, it's more common among women, but men do it too. Say I need a new pair of jeans and I'm going to buy a size 2, I'm going to buy a size 4, I'm going to buy a size 6, I'm going to buy a size 8 because I've never bought them before. I don't know how they're going to fit. They come in the mail. I try on the size 2. They fit like a glove. I don't even open the other ones. I just return them all, right? In your head, where do those returns go?
Yeah, you think they just go back to the shelves, right? You're like, hey, I didn't use it. It's going to go right back where it started. Someone else is going to get it.
No, but again, it takes time, effort, and money to validate those returns and put them back into inventory. So most
Right.
of those returns from those bracket buys just go to landfill. They just go to landfill because it takes the time to validate them and put them back in the system, right? All the operational costs that are behind the scenes, it's just too much work. Think of how fast those Amazon operators move, right? You got to scan, you got to batch, you got to go, you got to go. You don't have time to validate, make sure that it's not worn, to make sure the tags are on, make sure everything's in there. We do all of that so that they don't have to pay for it, right? So that's
Yeah.
how we can put it back into the system. We will repackage it, we'll put it in the labels,
You're
we'll
right.
make
That did ruin my day. Thanks, Catherine.
sorry. So
Because,
don't
well,
watch the documentary. The
you
documentary
know,
will ruin your day.
you know what that reminds me of? I
Mhm.
remember in Denver, I remember there was this new apartment complex that opened up downtown.
Yeah.
And I went, and one of my friends had got an apartment there, and I go there like when that first week, and I noticed under the sink they had a recycling bin, like a yellow bin, right?
Yes.
And I looked at it and I was like, "What's this doing here?" He's like, "Well, we recycle," and I was like, "Okay," because I'd lived downtown for years, and I'm like, that area did not have there's no,
Percent.
you'd never seen a recycling truck. It's not a thing. Like
Yeah.
there wasn't a method. I knew at the time that there was no method to pick this up. So I was like, well, then wait, where is this going? And so I started like it weirded me out. I kind of got fixated on it, and I started doing research. And basically, what turned out was that because not every county or not every place has the infrastructure for collecting
Recycle.
recycling and getting into a recycling plant and all that stuff. That it's a whole thing. But what started happening was that the people were demanding that like, well, I don't want to move into a place unless it has recycling, right? Save the planet. And that's great. So what
Yes.
was happening was that apartment complexes weren't able to compete as well with ones that had recycling. So they
Mhm.
just said, okay, here's recycling. So they would do that, but then at the end of the day, it ended up in the trash,
I was gonna
right?
say it's like the trash can with two holes and they both go in the same
Like
trash
literally,
can.
I am not joking. That's literally how it was set up in this
Yeah.
apartment complex. You'd have two chutes, and I'm like, okay, but I guarantee it's ending at the same thing at the bottom
Yeah.
because I know for a fact there's no functional way for them to there is no method where this goes off to recycling. And I just remember thinking how like, there was that disconnect of, we think, oh, look, we're doing something good, or we have this idea of what happens after when it leaves us, like you were saying, like, where do you think this return goes? And at the end of the day, it just ends up in the damn landfill. Right.
Yeah.
And I just it's yeah, that you're right. That ruined my day. So that's great. That's good.
Well, it's the psychological games that we play with ourselves so that we can, navigate safely through life, right? So you tell yourself like, oh, I'm going to return this and someone else is going to buy it and they're going to love it and it's going to be great and all those things. And it's how you justify your behavior and your consumerism cycle, right? It gives you permission to do that.
Yeah.
So it's good to have knowledge and awareness of that. But on the company side, they don't like that kind of behavior because they don't want to be seen as the company that's dumping everything in the landfill. And a lot of companies do care. The consumers are demanding companies be more sustainable and really make a difference in that way. So the companies that are serious about it and really want to align themselves with those types of philosophies, like it's an easy decision to make. Like you can do it on the return side.
So let's talk about, I mean, you've been at the company since January.
Yeah.
I usually like to ask about maybe like what kind of struggles the company has gone through. Have you, since in your tenure there so far, in the 5 months that you've been there, or well, I guess you went back since you said since September. So it sounds like they brought you on maybe fractionally or part-time first, and then yeah, and then you came out. Right? So have what kind of struggles have you come across while you've been there? And then are there any that you know of as far as like, was there a time where the CEO almost hung it up because it was, something was too complicated or too expensive or technology wasn't quite there? I'm just curious like where the big speed bumps have happened and then what you guys did to get through that.
Yeah, I think there's three main challenges that kind of came together and made it really hard to build what's happening at ReturnBear, because you have to take into account the inventory return side, the consumer return side, and then the fulfillment side. So you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with merchants, you're dealing with operations. Like there's so many pieces, and it still blows my mind that we're able to do this with such a small team, because there's less than 25 people at this company, but we are managing to do all of this in such a small container, which is just incredible. But I think that's also the strength and why we're excelling at these challenges is we're small, we're nimble, we can move very quickly. I think the biggest challenge that I've seen since I've been working with them is really trying to get people to understand that we are different, right? Everybody in SaaS, I've worked in SaaS for long enough to know, everybody raises their hand. They're like, we're different, we're special, we're this, that, and the other thing. But when you actually are different and special, it is hard, especially as a marketer, to get people to pay attention to that. And our main market that we serve is fashion brands. So apparel, jewelry, footwear, you know, those are not easy people to get a hold of, right? So our
No,
biggest
they're
customer
pretty
is
busy.
Skims. Well, our biggest customer is Skims, right? So we got that deal and that helped us build our street cred up and things like that. And then people started paying attention. But really educating people on the problem that we solve and why that solve is different and why that solve is so necessary is still probably one of the biggest things that we struggle with. But once people get it and you see it click, it's
Yeah.
easy because they realize we figured out all the messy middle stuff that they need. Um, and they don't have to deal with it and they don't have to worry about it anymore, right?
So what do you think is the hardest thing? How about this? What do you think makes it the hardest thing to scale in your industry, right? Because you did mention a couple other competitors that maybe have been there before, but you guys do both rather than just one thing or the other like they did. But what do you find is that makes it hard to scale from where you're at now versus where you guys want to be?
I think it's hard to change the mindset around returns, right? To really make people think that they are, they're not a cost center, they're not a necessary evil, that they are an opportunity to do something better and to bring profitability back to that return cycle. I think the other challenge for us is because we are logistics and not just software, we launched a warehouse in Australia back in March, right? So how do you have quality control and make sure your processes are the same halfway across the world when your team is in the United States and Canada, right?
Mhm.
So that scaling out process that we're doing, we're being very strategic with who we partner with. We're being very strategic with where we open up our next markets. So we have launch coverage in 4 different countries, but we want to continue growing and expanding, but we want to maintain that quality along the way. That is a very hard muscle to build.
I agree. I mean, yeah, I've interviewed a lot of people and I've had my business for like 14 years. So I've heard a lot of the issues where educating the market ends up being one of the steps, right? It's interesting too because, and maybe we'll talk post show about this because I'll go a little further with it later. But you know, part of me wonders, like, do you lean into it? Do you tell people like this hits landfills, right? Like your returns. I mean, granted, yeah, I mean, sure, there was a documentary, but that's their marketing, right? Like then there's your marketing, and it's kind of like when I look at it from the content marketing standpoint, I think is that something that you lean right into and almost may have to educate the audience a little bit about the consequences of it, of what happens if you don't do this thing, right?
Think it's a two-pronged approach. I think the merchants are kind of sort of aware of it because you are aware of what your operations are doing. The customers aren't always aware about it. And the thing is, the customers have the power. So if you
Mhm.
make the customers aware of it and then they're pressuring their merchants to do better, which is exactly what's happening on TikTok with the next generation, there are
Mhm.
absolutely people being like, I just found out that this company does all this stuff. Next thing you know, it goes viral, and then they have a PR disaster that they have to deal with, right? That education piece is really important. People are becoming aware of the problem through documentaries, through news articles, through things like that, and they're demanding the change, right? So you can either meet your customers' demands because at the end of the day, they're voting with their wallets.
Mhm.
Or you can try to wait it out and pretend like it doesn't exist and like it's going to go away. But I'm seeing a very positive shift in the way people are thinking about the planet that I haven't
Mhm.
really experienced over the past few years. Like there was a little bit of greenwashing happening along the way, but now the next generation of consumers is coming up and they're getting money and they are spending it with the companies that matter to them. Like they're not really accepting the greenwashing anymore. They want actual things that matter. So,
Yeah, you bring up a good point, like with the TikTok stuff. It's like, listen, I got my opinions about TikTok, but there are some things that it's useful for, right? And I would say that social activism of some kind, right? That's a really good platform for that, right? If you have a good message and you actually do discover something that is, an injustice or bad for the planet or the people, it does allow you to quickly spread that information. I think the downside is it also allows you to spread bad information all the time too. But one side of the coin, right? Um, but on that note, then being the CMO, we're both marketing people by trade. What are you doing to get the word out about Return Bear? How are you going up against Happy and Loop? And what kind of strategies are you using? Podcast, all right, check. I know that because
I
you're
was
on
gonna
right
say I'm
here.
talking to you.
Yeah, PR. Let's just put that one aside. PR, great,
Here.
nailing it. Okay, what else is Return Bear doing to compete and get more eyeballs on what you do?
Yeah. Well, the nice part is you like you mentioned Loop. Loop is actually an integrated partner with us. So
Oh, okay.
we don't have any competitors truly. It's a competitive space, but one of our strategies is we are friendly with everybody. We'll integrate with everybody. And we are basically plugging into a lot of people that are already in the industry. And we're not to be the Care Bears of the industry, but we are just really friendly with a lot of great partners. We have a lot of great logistics experience between, the four of us in the C-suite, and we're using that to leverage partnerships to our advantage. The
If
other
you were a Care Bear, I think you'd have a little brown box on your belly, right? Like,
Yes, the little UPS box. The other half of it that we're really leaning into heavy right now is somewhere in the last 4 years, events have made an astounding comeback. Everyone thought they were going to die with COVID and the pandemic, and us growing up in 2021, we weren't really sure how that was going to be part of the strategy, but we have gotten more traction from small fashion events and small e-commerce events and even big e-commerce events like Shop Talk, because we're having interesting conversations and people are paying attention. So events have become a huge part of our strategy on top of the PR and the social outreach and the partnerships. I think those are the three things we focus on the most from a marketing.
nice. So, with the spirit of the title, Future of BizTech, let's talk about, let's say a year out, because in tech, I really can't ever ask for anything more than a year because everything changes so fast, right? Where do you see, two-part question, where do you see the technology and logistical technology that you're using? Do you see any new innovations coming down the pipeline? Is there things that you guys are going to try to develop on your own in that next year? And then also, where do you see maybe the goals as a company? Like, do you guys want to double in growth? Are you trying to just be more product led? Just what are your 12-month goals and where do you think the industry is going?
Yeah, I would say personally at Return Bear, we're trying to get more reach globally, right? We're going to be lighting up more locations. We're going to be expanding. We're going to be expanding our drop off locations in the United States. We do have a product led growth strategy on our product roadmap where we're going to allow people to just come in and self onboard. We really are just in growth mode, hyper growth mode. Like I said, we're moving very fast. We're iterating every day. And we're just trying to get as many merchants as possible on our network because the more people work with us, the better it is for everybody because we can just learn that much faster and just perform that much better. So I think that's kind of the growth plan for us. We're experimenting with some new technology since BizTech, right?
Yeah.
Some of the new technology is like using AI verification in cameras and things like that to verify things faster and speed up some of those verifications. Because right now we verify everything by hand, right? We actually
Yeah.
do it the old-fashioned way, which is great. Our processes are tight, but that might be a future place that we can grow into. As for the industry itself, not to be cliche, but AI is everywhere, right? So I've seen a lot of companies start to experiment with AI sizing and AI like virtual wearing to try to cut down on the number of returns that they're experiencing. I've seen the tech at a couple different shows, some of it kind of good, some of it very janky. But I think that there's more opportunities to kind of implement AI into the shopping process that might help cut down on those returns but also make it a smoother process for the returns as well. You know,
Mhm.
if you anticipate that somebody's going to return something, you might be able to work that into, the process as a whole.
I have seen more preventative measures, right? So again, just as a regular consumer, Amazon being the big one,
Oh, yes.
I,
Frequently
I
returned item.
well, that, but also, so for example, I bought a pair of wrestling shoes actually recently because I do MMA stuff and I was trying to find the right shoes. I used to wrestle, and so I was like, okay, I remember how those fit, and I think that would be good for what I'm doing. So, point is I went on there and I was like, all right, this is my size, but it says basically it's like, hey, based on your order history and the feedback of others, we think that this size is going to fit for you. And what I realized what they had done, because you'll get two brands that have the same size, but they actually literally fit differently, or one's bigger, one's smaller. And so it's hard for you to know, am I going to be a 10 or an 11 or a 10 and a half and 11, right, in a shoe? And so I've noticed that they've been aggregating the return data, and they pair that with the data of like what is the size I always order, and then so they can tell like, okay, well, if JC orders a 10 and a half in this shoe because he's a 10 and a half, but this shoe always gets returned for being too small, then
Yeah,
it'll recommend an 11, for example, right, or something like that. And I thought that that was really smart, and I imagine that that is something, that's not exactly like super crazy innovative as much as just applying basic math and algorithms to the macro problem. But I think that that's great that there is technology going into the preventative side, so it just even prevents anyone from having to return it at all, and it makes them less likely to do the bracket purchases like you were talking about.
exactly. Yeah. And it improves the customer experience. So even though the tech might be super advanced behind all of that, to the consumer who's never seen that before, they're amazed. Like their mind is blown and they think this is the best thing since sliced bread because it's new to them, it's innovative to them, and it's improving their experience. Like improving that customer experience can be so powerful. I just had a really terrible return experience yesterday with a company, and I wanted to call them and be like, you need ReturnBear because I went through their portal and then they said, "Ooh, sorry, you need to email this person." Like I went through the whole form and all that stuff. And they're like, "You need to email this person." So I email this person. I'm like, "Hey, I'm in the return window. I need to return this item. The portal wasn't working. I'm not gonna say whose portal it was because I'm not gonna throw shade, but the portal wasn't working. And what do I do?" And she's like, "Oh, I'll send you a label, no problem." It's been 48 hours. I still haven't gotten my label. So and I'm remembering that. I'm never going to buy from that brand again because I don't want that experience. But a lot of that technology that goes into it, whether it's simple, whether it's complex, if it's improving the experience, that's the kind of stuff you need. And yes, Amazon has a huge data set that they can pull from and make those recommendations. Every merchant we add to our data set, we have that data too. So we have
Yeah.
aggregated data from all the returns and the return patterns of all of these people, which will improve the experience for everybody overall. And we get to learn and iterate in our platform because of that data.
And then throw a little bit of AI, sprinkle some AI at the top like
Hello,
sugar.
Sprinkle AI.
Little sprinkle of AI. So being a CMO and in the tech space here, well, how about this? How long have you been in marketing in general?
Oh, 17 years.
Okay, all right. So you're an OG. Got it. All
Yeah,
right.
a while.
What is probably the best advice you've ever either been given or that you kind of conjured up yourself just through experiences that you would pass on to, let's say, another CMO listening right now?
I would probably say, I don't want to say always be the first, but always be the first. When somebody's talking to you about some new wild thing, be the first one. Be the first one there to learn it. I got my start in marketing. I was a design major, and I got my start in marketing because my teacher said, "Hey, you seem to know this Facebook thing pretty well. Can you help me run it for my business?" Before social media marketing was even a thing. Like that wasn't even a thing. I had to set up a group for this guy's business. Um, but I learned it because it was interesting and I got curious about it. So I always tell people stay curious, even if something sounds, too good to be true or whatever. A really good friend of mine who's a professor was talking about AI a couple of years ago. And I listened, I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, I'm just going to send you this thing. It's called Chat GPT. Play around with it. So before it even hit mainstream anything, I
Yeah.
started playing around with it. And it really put me ahead of the AI curve because by the time everybody else caught up, I was already a couple years ahead. So I
Yeah.
always tell people like stay curious, look for the weird stuff that's going on, even if you don't think it's going to pan out into anything. You never know what you might learn that might turn into something else. Like you might learn a skill from some weird platform that doesn't exist anymore. There's a few that I have tried that don't exist anymore. You might learn something that turns into something else. So,
Yeah, but I always said experimenting is the key. The most money I've ever lost and the most money I've ever made have come from experiments, right? Like trying to be first on something and saying, "Oh, I wonder how this will work." Or also too, like taking unrelated, what seemingly unrelated things from other industries
yes.
and bringing them in. Like, being in the tech space, you'd be surprised. Like, if you go just spend some time in the blue collar world, you'd be surprised what you would find that they do there that you go, oh my gosh, we could do that over here. I was at a networking event yesterday for business acquisitions, right? And I'm used to the standard way of acquiring a business. And you start with like an LOI, letter of intent and stuff. There's just kind of this accepted step-by-step process. And I'm talking to this real estate person, which is seemingly unrelated. And he says to me, he goes, because I was like, yeah, I was like, yo, well, I get this LOI with this business I'm looking at. And he goes, why don't you just put it under contract? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, just buy it, basically. He's like, just whatever they're asking, he's just say yes and you put it under contract. He's like, it's like buying a house. He's like, you can accept the price of the house, but then you go through your due diligence, right? You have inspectors that go in there and stuff, and it also gives you the
Time.
time to work with the bank to get the money. Like in real estate, it's accepted that you close or that you can't go under contract, but then there's gonna be time where you're finishing out the process, and then closing comes at the end, and that's when the money's exchanged. He's like, why don't you just put it under contract? Because then it's your deal. And he says, hey, he goes, if you do the due diligence and the deal was undervalued, you could technically sell the deal because you own it for that time. He's like, you
Yeah.
could make money not even taking the deal. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like, I hadn't thought about that because it's an unrelated industry. Like, so basically taking something from the real estate industry and applying that toward like regular business acquisitions, right? So I think that's cool. It's good advice that you give, I guess is my point. I like that. Um, well, listen, I'm glad that you got to come on the show here. Where can people find you personally if they just heard something they loved and they want to reach out for any kind of big deals? Um, and then also, where can they find the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go visit ReturnBear at any time at returnbear.com, or strike up a conversation with us on LinkedIn. We're all very funny in our own ways. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm linkedin.com/INKT creativity, or my website for my agency, because I am a fractional CMO expert and I do work with a lot of startups, is ktcreativity.com. So you can see a lot of the companies that I've worked for, from the big Fortune 500s all the way down to all the small startups that I love that are near and dear to my heart.
Fantastic. And listen, for everybody listening right now, thank you again for listening to another episode of the Future of BizTech. And hey, if you liked it, give it a 5-star review, share it, tag it, comment, whatever you got to do, because that is how tech nerds like us find cool podcasts like this. Catherine, thanks again for being on the show. I look forward to talking to you more about Return Bear.
Thank you so much.